This is Science 7, and what our attention is going to focus on today is the non-focusability of consciousness. So I will give you a metaphor. Suppose that you had an invisible magnetic sphere, ultimately greased, so that any approach to the sphere would always develop a tangent parallel to the sphericality, so that any approach, visual, touching, smell, thinking, would always, no matter at what tangent it comes into the sphere, would always parallel the surface infinitely. That kind of focus is a black hole. And that this universe should have the existence of such a structure is proof positive that we're transcendental. There is no way that we can be a thing in a universe that permits black holes to exist. We must be a fluid, continuous infinity in actuality, so that there is an odd kind of symbiosis in really deep meditative states. They used to be called trances, and they're still called states, although they're not states at all. A better term would be unbounded fields. In high Dharma, unbounded fields, consciousness, I have to say it in two stages. Consciousness is what it is, but what it is also includes what it isn't. And the is and the isn't in perfect equilibrium cancel each other out. And when they do, absolutely nothing occurs. That absolute nothing should occur is a corollary to the cosmos having black holes. And that we should be the kind of creature that is capable of that is an indication to us that ultimately the bottom line is a mystery. The bottom line is not a tragedy. Life is not a tragedy. It's equally a comedy as a tragedy, although it seems like that can't possibly be. But it's not a tragedy and it's not a comedy, it is a mystery. So that in a very interesting way, when you have someone like a Shakespeare who worked with comedies very early on and then gathered into himself the power of tragedy and then worked with tragedies, and then in trying to balance comedy and tragedy worked with a third form like histories, there comes a time when one realizes, if you're Shakespeare, not a Shakespeare, there's only one Shakespeare, but there comes a time when what you're writing about in terms of life can neither be a tragedy or a comedy or a history. You end up with a mystery. And The Tempest, as a play, is a mystery. It's all about the magic of continuously parallel non-approachability, which has a vibration. It has a reverberation. And that reverberation is what we would call, in terms of late 20th century America, a la the Philadelphia story or high society, it's true love. that two completely dissimilar beings could come together into a unity is a mystery. So that true love has something to do with black holes. So next time you play the soundtrack of High Society and you hear Satchmo talking, singing, there's something to do with Kip Thorne's black holes and time warps. It's a peculiarity. Reality is peculiar. And that peculiarity has a taste. It doesn't have a taste for senses, but it has a taste for consciousness. And once you get it, once there's a recognition for you of the taste of the peculiarity of reality, it becomes noticeable as a substrate every time there's a puzzlement, every time there's a surprise, every time that there's a conundrum, every time that there is an unknown, every time that there's an infinity. There will be that taste of the peculiarness of reality. And such a recursive recognition can only happen because you yourself are of that class of mysteriousness. Now, saying that is an introduction. Let's retrench. Let's come back. Let's devote the rest of the morning to try to reapproach what I've just been saying. Let's see if we can get back there. Where are we going to get back to? We're going to get back to a cosmic extension of vision. A cosmic extension of vision. The only way to get back to that cosmic extension of vision is through some kind of a transcendent seeing. Vision is a kind of a transcendent seeing. And in order to have a transcendent seeing on scale of the cosmos, we have to have a lens. And the lens which allows what we are to see the cosmos, that lens is the person. So that the person is a lens. And just as there are gravitational lenses in the universe that permit us to see enormous distances, billions of light years, gravitational lenses occur within our spirit. And the focus of that gravitational lens of the person is a meditative continuity which generates in its equanimity a discontinuity which is the differential mind that we use to think with and analyze with. Now all of this is very highfalutin. It's expensive language. This kind of talk takes a long time to be able to hear. And it takes a longer time to be able to say. So we're going to work ourselves back to a cosmological scale of vision that we began with this morning. And we're going to do it through the gravitational lens of the person. But we need to have an origin. We need to have a beginning. Because even though the spread out of vision becomes unbounded in a cosmic sense, and its formulation is given a shape by the gravitational lens of the person, it must start from some single origin, or it would not lend itself to existence. if it didn't have a single point of origin, it could still have a quality which we would designate as existence, but it would not necessarily be real. It is a very, very, very difficult, very abstruse. In fact, Lao Tzu and the Tao Te Ching uses the Chinese ideogram for abstruse twice in a row when he's talking this way. When I translated the Tao Te Ching, there was no question. You had to translate it. The phrase meant abstrusely abstruse. Abstruse squared. It's a kind of like 2,500-year-old quantum physicist without the mathematical tools to express it, trying to say something which is real and therefore peculiar. And it's true that later on, Chinese Taoist thought developed the differential calculus in the 9th century. But they never had a notation to write it down. And it wasn't until the late 20th century when Joseph Needham was researching science and civilization in China, the great 20-volume set published by Cambridge University Press, that he realized that there were 9th century Taoists in China who understood differential calculus as a meditative technique, but they had no expressive language with which to note it down. And so it was not passable from generation to generation except in abstrusely abstruse, highly individuated situations. And of course, that's such a precarious situation that the possibilities are very frequently squeezed out of existence. They simply don't happen. And from the time that the Mongols took over China, commencing the Yuan dynasty, that particular level of thought was lost tradition, which is why China did not develop a scientific technology beyond the level of Marco Polo until contact with Europeans. There were occasional geniuses like Wang Yang who would have been capable of that level of thought, but they had no community, and they had no language, and they had no tradition, and so they became errant geniuses. So we're trying to get back to a cosmological vision that we began with today. And the nature of cosmological vision is that life is a mystery, a provable mystery. Or as one might say in Shakespeare, a mystery indeed. Or, to use an Elizabethan rhetoric, a mystery well met. We're trying to get back to it through a gravitational lens known as the person. And we know that that gravitational lens of the person is able to focus and see an unbounded infinity of a cosmic vision. But that its seeability in terms of both existence and reality are dependent upon a phase-form pair, which are very difficult to separate, to differentiate. And the phase-form pair are: existence means that there is a beginning point to the cone of vision, and reality is that the is of no dimension. So that there's a geometry of differential vision. And that geometry of differential vision has a beginning point. And that cone that fans out even into unboundedness from that beginning point guarantees existence. But the fact that on further appreciation, notice I don't say analysis, on further appreciation that the point vanishes from singleness to singularity makes the mystery real. And makes the reality of the mystery of life the substrate upon which existence actually does occur, but is not the bottom line. So the bottom line is not existence, but reality. And the guarantee of that is that singleness winks out into singularity. And thus, on cosmic scale, you have black holes, and on individual scale, you have enlightenment. You have a scale of reality below singleness. So that the very tautology of identity, which the ego needs for its existence, can wink out. And the enlightened spirit can recognize that somebody turned off the switch. And identity no longer operates. And what is functioning now is a singularity. And that the singularity has a very peculiar quality, a mysteriously peculiar quality. That any approach, in any way, in n dimensions, to that singularity, ends up being like approaching an invisible sphere that is ultimately graced, and that any approach in any way, in any dimension, ends up as a parallel infinitely to an invisible, ultimately graced sphere. So that the proof, the test proof analytically, notice how that fly bounced off my invisibility? The intense proof is that perfect clocks and absolutely accurate measurements do no longer work. It's like the old ancient wisdom test. The old ancient wisdom test was not that something worked, but that in this case, what always works does not work. That's how you know that it's real, that it doesn't work. Now the ego, the worldly jerk, will always misunderstand that. That's how you can tell a jerk. They're never going to get it. Perfect little nutshell example of this is the word association test that Carl Jung made when he was a young man. And they teach in universities around the world, and psychiatrists around the world use the technique in the wrong way. They give you a word, you're supposed to give an association, right? When they build up from the associations, oh, yeah, when you were a kid, you saw your neighbor undressing, and look what happened to you. Where the workability of the word association test is that what tells you that there's something mysterious there is that there are no associations. The word association test is originally works because there are certain words for which you have no association. Something's missing, there's a gap, and only by patiently putting together what you don't respond to, what you don't have a response to, which means what you don't have a representation, function for, that got interfered with by something beyond you, deeper than the ego, unconscious. And that when this particular shape of no responses is put together into a pattern, one comes up with, Jung's term for it initially was a shadow, which is a black hole person. It's a black hole persona. It's a not you. It's a not I. A not I which participates in your life functioning by not having a shape and dogs you like a Mr. Hyde to your Jekyll. Using Robert Louis Stevenson's great formula. And so to correct the often used quote of Buckaroo Banzai, which is, remember, wherever you go, there you are, is to watch out for the not you, which is not there and therefore dangerous. Now, in order to bundle together, I'm using a mathematical term, in order to fiber bundle together the I and the not I, you need to have a vision capacity which brings together the seen and the unseen. And because the unseen is always differentiable and the seen always integral, you have to have the ability to have a fiber bundle of wholeness so that the seen and the multiple unseen are parenthetically brought into complementarity. And this word brings us to the revolution in physics in the 20th century. And science anymore without complementarity. And the complementarity is not a question of putting yin in one hand and yang in the other hand. And by egotistically working yin and yang to weave some kind of a fabric which you see and then you identify, that's it. That's this thing. That level is the level of identity and existence, but that level in no way exhausts the possibility of the mystery of reality. It's simply a surface blur, ladies and gentlemen. It's an oil slick on the top of an ocean. And no matter how beautiful the swirls and permutations of that oil slick, what's important to you is the ocean. Because if you don't learn to navigate and deal with that ocean, your time with that oil slick is very limited. Y'all are going to drown sooner or later. So this kind of education not only is more better now than the education which you can buy elsewhere, it's radically different in the sense that it is real and not simply an existential pattern for getting more faster and improved. There's a totally different reality that's operating here. Okay, let's return back. Beginning, we began with a cosmological vision, and we decided at speaker's whim to retrench and see if we can work our way back to that vision, back to that cosmological vision. And that not only is this a universe in which black holes occur, but we are a spirit in which a singularity like a black hole also occurs. On deepest level of meditative accuracy, an accuracy that transcends the point and gets down to focus of no dimension. We're trying to get back to it, and we talked about how the gravitational lens of the person is essential but how also the beginning of a vision, the beginning of vision itself, is important for existence, but the point of the beginning of vision into nothing whatsoever is necessary in order to appreciate reality. You cannot analyze reality, but you can appreciate it. Whereas you can analyze existence to any degree of exactness that you require. If you want to calibrate color to a millionth of a part of an angstrom, you can. Modern technology can provide you with the most accurate Chinese red you ever want. Do you want a Nanjing Chinese red or a Shanghai Chinese red? We'll give it to you. You can get it exact. You tell us what time of day, what kind of weather, we'll give you that Chinese red. Do you want it on silk or do you want it on cotton? Exactly. Existence is what it is because it is only exactly what it is. And identity functions in the universe because existence is itself the sine qua non of that functioning. Exactness and existence go together. They're a pair. But reality and exactness and non-exactness equally are the mystery of life. In our education, we have on pages 22 to 23, which would be almost exactly in the middle. The extension on page 24 is exactly in the middle of the paradigm. The paradigm being this outline, the ecumene, education outline, and opening up exactly in the middle. A friend of mine once did an illustration of Moby Dick. Roger, and he did about 100 illustrations of Moby Dick, and he had this Merlin-like wizard who opened the book on cetology, the study of whales, exactly to the center and put the mysterious ruler that measures person as the bookmark exactly at the beginning and said, whales are very interesting. Yeah. Yeah. So within this 3-page diatribe on vision as consciousness is this statement. Vision as a transformation medium. Should be media, right? Vision as a transformation media is directly related to nature, parentheses, a transformation medium in itself. So that vision and nature are a complementarity. Nature and vision are a complementarity. Nature and consciousness are a complementarity. And taken together, they are a mystery. Taken individually, either one, they have a... But when nature and consciousness are brought together, you no longer have existence, you have reality. And they are distinguishable. They have a different taste. The taste of reality is that it's peculiar. It's radically, surprisingly strange. It's, let's face it, it's weird. No relation to me. Whereas nature is not weird, it is familiar. Nature is always familiar. You always know this is natural. But it takes a kind of a focus to note that this is natural. Fresh air and fresh water are infamous because we run across them so infrequently now that they're extremely noticeable, whereas primordial man never noticed fresh air and fresh water at all because they were just so ambiently there. But fresh air and fresh water can be accurately analyzed and measured. That existence of them can be made very, very precise. Whereas it's the same for us now as it was for Paleolithic men and women. The mystery of reality is not approachable at all, though it is appreciable. And that's why the vehicle for the appreciation of the mystery of the universe is through the art of the person. You see how now the language, which you thought was just colloquial, is actually very precise language. The tradition of wisdom has used these terms really precisely for a long time. How long? At least 5,000 years. The tradition I teach in is about 5,000 years old in its written form. How old is it before then? Who knows? As Gandhi said, it's as old as the hills. But the written form is about 5,000 years old. We know because the Egyptian, like the Pyramid of Unas, has within it, on the inside surface of the pyramid, the exact progression of integration and differentiation that is being presented here in this education. So that by entering into the pyramid, on the inside surface of the pyramid, one makes one's way to the sarcophagus. And the focus of all of the written language, the hieroglyphics, sacred language, the focus of all the sacred language is to take you from the opening point to the sarcophagus. And when you reach the sarcophagus, it is empty in the ancient wisdom tradition. There's no one there. And that was the proof of reality. That later ignorant, egotistical megalomanias preserve themselves as mummies and put their mummies there is a sign of great ignorance. It's a sign of real stupidity. Mystery comes, you don't want to be there. You want to be gone. As Kazantzakis said, I can't wait for Mr. Death to find the cinder that I'm going to leave. I won't be here. That's wisdom. Whereas to keep yourself as a long-term target for all the crap that there is really dumb. So no wonder they're chipping away at these mummies and doing all sorts of things that, it's... The Greek term, sarcophagus, means body eater. It's limestone. And if you put this body in a limestone box, the limestone will dissolve the skin, the flesh, the muscles, the blood vessels, the bones. And eventually, after many hundreds, after thousands of years, the sarcophagus will be empty. And you will have achieved reality. Yeah. Your yogis may not tell you this, but this is what. So that the fact that there is a sacred space where you were means that you have gone elsewhere. Where have you gone? Beyond. You're no longer in this universe of existential conditionedness on any scale, in any dimension, to any degree of exactness. You have vanished. You have gone beyond. You have achieved infinite life, eternal glory, actual mystery. So the language that's being used here has long tradition, is really there, has a direct link with the Pyramid of Unas and the description of black holes in 1995. Real good line, and the line is sinuous, of course, sometimes on the surface, and somebody teaches it. Sometimes a whole millennium goes by, nobody's teaching it. Does it go away? No. Where's it going to not go? Because is and isn't are water off the duck's back of reality. Reality is as impervious to isn't as it is to is. In the High Dharma and the Vimalakirti Sutra, Vimalakirti is sick with cosmic disease, and the Buddha, in his omniscience, sends somebody to inquire about Vimalakirti's health. And Vimalakirti tells him, he says, well, as long as the universe is ignorant, I'm going to be sick. And the figure comes back to report to the Buddha, and the Buddha says, well, can somebody go and cure Vimalakirti of this illness so he can return to health? And everyone that goes on every level, all the gods, all the devas, all the yogis, they can't do anything. And it's like the tar baby. They can't leave Vimalakirti, and they get sick too. So finally the Buddha himself goes to Vimalakirti. Vimalakirti refuses to get better as long as there's ignorance in the universe. And the Buddha identifies that the ignorance is maintained by a single blemish spot of ego. If you will give it to me, right here and now, I will dispose of it for you. And he was better. But for everyone who was sick, who got that illness, there was a rain of flowers, and the flowers stuck to them. But when they were cured, the flowers just went off them, and it was beautiful. It was a rain of flowers instead of a rain of things that stuck to you. How do you know when you're cured? When the rain of beneficence doesn't stick to you any more than the problems. The is and the isn't are equidistantly balanced in reality. So here, coming back, we're going to take a break in about a minute. Let's come back. We're working with a creative structure that has imagination gone wild. It's imagination up to a certain level, and the horizon of images fails to reach on its tiptoes and fingertips to where we want to be, and we, following the lines of imageal geometry, finally let go of trying to stand on tiptoes and reach it with fingertips and just float free. And when we do so, the entire construct of imagination geometry is left behind. It's like leaving behind, and one experiences free fall. Until one comes in proximity of new body, like the moon, and one begins to get the whispers, the peculiar whispers of a new gravity. And one can respond to that and be in that new gravity, but one also has the recognition that there is a gravityless, free fall quality of our reality. And you may have to do several thousand planets like this in many star systems, but after a while you get it. That gravity goes with existence, unfocusable bodies, but that you also continue to function without that condition, though it seemed to you that that was the basis of what you thought was real before. It's only the basis of existence. And that's no limitation for us. So let's read this sentence into its paragraph and read the paragraph through. It's been here all this time. This was written years ago. And then we'll take a break. Vision as a transformation medium is directly related to nature, a transformation medium in itself. They are, in fact, together a continuity. But this is a continuum with a twist. As it were, a Mobius strip configuration when seen abstracted. Looks like an infinity sign. The ancient Hermetic symbol, Hermetic infinity sign. An infinity sign, a Hermetic symbol of transformation in ancient and accepted tradition. That's the Scottish way of talking. The two, vision and nature, are complementarities. The one subconscious, hidden, or occult, when the other is visible, conscious. Thus, vision is occult in nature. And nature is occult in vision. Or occult in reality. And that's what's the mystery. Let's take a break. Let's come to The Conscious Universe, the book by Minos Kafatos that no one can find. On page 21, Light and Relativity Theory. And he begins talking about the Michelson-Morley experiment about 100 some years ago of splitting a beam of light so that one part of it went perpendicular to the other part to see if there was a time difference, if anything would affect the speed of light, and nothing did. And so the speed of light became a constant, which was trustworthy. The speed of light became an existential number, an existential fact. And this was eventually expressed in Einstein's E equals mc square equation. And E equals mc square as an equation is an amulet. Amulet seals the ratio, hermetically seals the ratio of mass and light in existence. That mass and the speed of light, so that the speed of light. What is the speed of light? The speed of light is the photon traversing space. Traversing a space is the speed of light. The photon is rather infinitesimal in size, and its extended line in 1 second is 186,000 miles. So the speed of light is actually a computational thing. It is a infinitesimal thickness of a line, 186,000 miles long, in a second. And that has a definable, recognizable, computational, analytical relationship to mass. And E equals mc square is like an old Paleolithic amulet that protects us from ignorance as long as we wear that around our mind and we're dealing with a universe in which everything is relative, that amulet will protect us from chaos, really exotic randomness, from jeopardy, and that protection lasted about 20 years. Einstein put it out beginning in 1905, and by the time it got really doctored up and sophisticated, it was junked by quantum physics, by the uncertainty of Heisenberg, by Schrödinger's wave theory, by Bohr's complementarity theories, and we've had a lot of problems since then. Now, in the time of safety and security between when Einstein began in 1905 with his Brownian movement papers to begin positing how even randomness has a kind of a limitation in this universe because we know something that cannot be transgressed, to the point in time in history 20 years later where it was recognized that this security, this safety, is essentially insecure and safe only in one flat side of a deep uncertainty. The motor car came into, the automobile came into its flourishing. The 1905 automobile, if you see pictures of it or go to a museum, is kind of a highfalutin coach. It was still a coach. And by 1925, it had become the Stutz Bearcat. So in that period of confidence, man really went overboard and went from the horseless carriage to the Stutz Bearcat, and after that, the car market sort of collapsed because security in the universe collapsed. Not right away, but news filtered down, and the crash of the stock market may, who knows, have a lot to do with the deep insecurity that uncertainty brought to the world of measurability. Is all of this Alice in Wonderland talk? Yes. Is it still real? Yes. One can waters of superficial certainty the reflected grin of the Cheshire Cat. And what does the Cheshire Cat say? He says, "Who are you?" Now, in the conscious universe, when Kafatos is writing about light and relativity theory, talking about light, talking about the thing which is in the E equals mc squared. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. So not only is it an infinitesimally thick, photon thick line, 186,000 miles long in a second, if you let the light thing, the light line segment, exist for 2 seconds, it would be twice as long as 186,000 miles. 402,000 miles long. And if more time went by, it would be longer. If you let an entire year go by, it would be a photon with one-dimensional line, 1 light year long. That would be the thing. That would be the segment. That's measurable. It has existence. It can be, as a thing, manipulated in an integral way by the brain and factored into the characterization of exact reality in terms of existence. Factored into the exact reality, qua reality, if you take the differential development of that one-dimensional line segment. And the differential quality of being able to understand that one-dimensional line segment is due to the genius of a man named Riemann. A Riemann surface here's a book on Riemann surfaces. Amazing. A Riemann surface is a one-dimensional line. Let's get ourselves a little bit better acquainted here. At the very beginning of the text, it gives us, this is a text, 1992 mathematics, graduate text in mathematics. Springer Verlag in Heidelberg, New York, London, Paris, Tokyo, Hong Kong, everywhere in the world. These books are used, these concepts are used, and it doesn't matter if you're capitalist or communist, if you're Chinese or you're Czech. This is how it goes. We, of course, begin with the definition. A Riemann surface is a complex, one-dimensional, connected analytic manifold. One dimension. Oh, we'll get to differentiable manifolds in just a minute. And after that, to the analysis of space-time singularities, which is what Kip Thorne is talking about in Black Holes and Time Warps, at the top of the stack. But before we get to that, we have to go through books on topology, geometry and the imagination, graph theory, a lot of things. We can't get to that stack until we deal with something very fundamental here. It's on page 21. There's a little diagram. Other than the words, there's a diagram. And the diagram has to do with electric and magnetic complements. That somehow this one-dimensional line segment of light has, well, to use 1920s black American lingo, it's conked. You know, in the 20s, blacks wanted to straighten their hair, so they got it conked. Well, the light wave by itself, en natural, is unconked. It wiggles. It wiggles exactly in the way in which the electric and magnetic components of the energy play. And in electromagnetic, beginning with in electromagnetic energy, the complement is such that the magnetic element component is, I think, very large and the electrical very small, but in magnetoelectric energy, it's just the other way around. So that when a man named Maxwell, a Scot, when James Clerk Maxwell, about 100-some years ago, was formulating the theory of electromagnetic radiation, that energy, that unconked energy line, is a radiation. And that radiation is subject to a painstakingly infinite analysis where one can actually write out, like on the interior of the Pyramid of Unas reaching the sarcophagus, can write on the interior of the brain reaching to the point where the mind flashes into differential operativeness. One can write a hieroglyphic, which is higher mathematical, and those higher mathematical hieroglyphics of over 100 years ago, before there were any automobiles whatsoever, James Clerk Maxwell were able to write down exactly how electromagnetic energy theoretically operates. And on that basis, it was understood Though not believed at the time, it was understood that all of the equations solve both in a positive and in a negative way. But being a Victorian, James Clerk Maxwell in the 1880s, being a Victorian Englishman, Scottish Englishman, paid no attention to the negative solutions. That can't be. So he dealt with the positive solutions, which are electromagnetic energy. But the negative solutions and the equally as important and interesting. And that magnetoelectric energy is about 10 billion times the frequency of electromagnetic energy. So that not only is the quality of thingness in the electromagnetic universe rather suspect in terms of there-ness, and we'll see its there-ness has to do with space, and that space is very questionable. Frankly, it's questionable. What kind of space are you talking about? Are you talking about Riemann surfaces? Are you talking about Hamiltonian space? Many kinds of space. But not only is the there-ness of existence questionable with great accuracy, but there is a totally different kind of existence at about 10 billion times the frequency of what we were told was there and real and thing. And so something which is quite real in the magnetoelectric universe could walk through the electromagnetic universe and never leave a trace of its passage. There could be phantom spirits as real and solid as anything that you could imagine, walking right through here. We would never know. I mean, there's so much space in between the electrons and the protons and neutrons now in ordinary, very ordinary electromagnetic material. The space in an atom, as Buckaroo Banzai says, is so vast you could travel in that space if you had a machine. But the magnetoelectric universe, being 10 billion times more spacious than this, the possibilities of any kind of a collision of even one particle with another are very remote, to use the term, very remote. So that high energy being, having legitimate mathematical equation basis for life, could exist quite comfortably in the projected cosmic spaces of what is here already. We don't even have to get fancy about it or fanciful, though we could do both and increase the mysteriousness. What it means is told is real on the basis of its spatial thusness is completely up for grabs. No way that that's not questionable, and it's not questionable on the basis of fantasy. It's on the basis of exactness. And the mysticism of the 21st century is a mysticism of real exactness. 21st century is going to be like the 14th century, a great mystical century. All of this stuff that you see is going to go. Faster than the morning after froth. Within 15 years, none of this will make any difference. What will begin to make difference is the exact mysteriousness of life and of our spiritual quality. But the only way to get operative on that level of actuality is to be tutored up to speed. because the humdrum natural education doesn't do it, doesn't even do it for the pitifully small electromagnetic limitations. It has no bearing whatsoever, usually, on scale of reality. So you're ahead of your time, at least generation ahead of getting acquainted. When we turn to page 37, after reading for about 16 pages in the first chapter, which is called Leaving the Realm of the Visuable, the conscious universe begins. Chapter 1 is leaving the realm of the visuable. You have to leave behind what you can visualize. Now, this is very peculiar. Remember about the taste of consciousness? It's very peculiar. Third book on this stack, one of the most famous books of the 20th century. If you're going to list the famous books of the 20th century, this would be among the top 4 or 5. You may never have heard of it. It's by a man named David Hilbert. It's called Geometry and the Imagination in English translation. My German is as bad as my French and Chinese and everything else. Analytic geometry? Will that do? Geometry and Imagination. This nice little reprint, you can actually buy this for about $20-some. It's still in print because there's no way it's going to go out of print. Göttingen, June 1932, David Hilbert. The basis for this book was a course of lectures given 4 times weekly called Analytic Geometry, which I gave at Göttingen in the winter of 1921 and 20 and 21. And when it was published in 1932, it was so devastating because the limitations of geometry and imagination became notorious. Not only that the limitations became notorious, but in another way. What's the other way? The other way is the polarity of notorious. What is the polarity of notorious? Famous. Geometry and imagination became famous and their limitations notorious at the same time when this book came out, because it was a really strong characterization by first-class mind, David Hilbert, first-class mind. Real great mind. Real, evenly clear, all the way to openness. It was so difficult that a little tiny book called Elementary Concepts of Topology, written in Moscow, just before the Stalin purges, killed off all these beautiful people. Paul Alexandrov, and it's like an appendix to Hilbert's Geometry and the Imagination. Elementary Concepts of Topology. Now, why would there be this little book, reprinted by Dover, for $3.50? Why? You can get the whole thing for under $30. This is amazing. Sorry for the Hollywood glibness, but loud and dirty. Why is this important? It's important because a thing called topology, and this is one of the best little textbooks on topology, Hawking and Young, reprinted also in Dover. And if you turn to Kip Thorne's Black Holes and Time Warps, and you look in the bibliography, and you're looking here, and you're seeing that there are all kinds of articles, and there are very few books. One comes here to see that the study of like map, graph, surfaces, with all the permutations, has something to do always with visuability and with the ideas that structure visibility. visibility is an image base. And that image base is like a surface. And the surface of the image base is rather uneven. And its unevenness is exactly conditioned by certain structures which are resonant to ideas. And that topology is the study of the idea structure which deforms a horizon of an image base. And that if you keep an image base perfectly natural, it tends to be like a Riemann surface. It tends to be a one, and that one dimension is conditioned by the mythic line. We have to say something here. How come? How come this is true? We have to think really, we have to bring ourselves into attention, just like a yogi would do. Get ourselves into body position, feet level, breath even. What the hell are we talking about? What is it that we're trying to imagine here? We're trying to use the imagination to see in our minds something which is not in the air. We can take it from our minds and put it onto paper, or we can put it onto a computer screen, but we can't bring it out of the air, even though we can prove that it's in the air already. There's radiation that makes this possible, but we're going to take it out of our minds. What is mythology? Mathematics. What is a myth? Well, what is the word myth? The word in Greek is mythos. Mythos. It's usually translated in How to Write a Play textbook. A mythos is a plot. It's a plot. It's a graphable line of development that has a beginning and an end. And in between the beginning and the end, it has a certain development. It has an exact beginning, it has a more or less development, and it has an end. This line of development, this plot, notice that mathematics uses the term plot all the time. What are you plotting in mathematics? That's very much like a myth. You're plotting, yes, it's just like a myth. You're plotting points that connect, and the connectedness of the points give you the line, one-dimensional development, and the resonance of that one-dimensional development is a plane. And when you have the point, the line, and the plane, you now have the materials to make a geometry. But when the creative juices are really flowing, when you're, let's say, for instance, a Russian at the beginning of great Russian genius, living in Bavaria and southern Germany, so you have that wonderful combination of Russian mad vitality and German exactness, then you have the conditions of a Kandinsky. A Kandinsky, a sequel to his little book concerning the spiritual in art. The sequel the next year was called From Point to Line to Plane. When you have a point, and you have a line, and you have a plane, you can then have not only a geometry, but you have the materials which cut out of the universe an exactly limited condition. And everything that is outside that exactly limited condition is now a specifically unknowable but noticeable mystery. And that all of Kandinsky's art is all about preparing us to see exactly what we can see to the points of exact limitation, and then letting ourselves go beyond and appreciating the mysteriousness. And that Kandinsky's art transcends objective form into space and color, transgeometrical arenas of interest, and that his abstract art has everything to do with the limitations of the graphic imagination, which only operates in existential nature, which is made to operate in existential nature, but like a jet engine can't work in space. Now, if you have a jet engine that works on planet Earth, if you took it, transported it to one of the moons of Saturn like Titan, which has thick atmosphere, jet engine would work on Titan also. But in between, it doesn't work at all because there's not enough air. The ego is a limitation in topographically localized existence, which only works under certain limited conditions. If the spec list is not met, it doesn't work. Whereas most of reality is outside the domain of that limitation. The ego is a limited vehicle to put one's trust in. And an education that does not prepare you to appreciate that is not worthy of the name. It has nothing to do with weekend retreats, especially when those are folded into a mythos which has a sealed horizon that deforms itself along with your suppositions of identity. There's no way for you to know that you're operating within very narrow confines because it seems like you're going anywhere that you want to go. Because that Riemann surface can be modulated in such a way it seems like a manifold, but it is not. It is one-dimensional all the way. So that spiritual freedom, if you want to make an issue out of it, can be very mysterious indeed. There's no way that someone can talk to you simply about it, but in order to talk to you realistically about it, one has to use the term simplex. And we'll see. The simplex is very, very important. Let's look at this stack for just a second. Let's come to the stack. Let's come to this stack in terms of page 37 out of the conscious universe. On page 37, at the very top, is a headline of a new concluding section of chapter 1. The chapter is entitled Leaving the Realm of the Visuable, and the last section, unnumbered, a non-Wittgensteinian technique, an unnumbered last section of chapter 1, but headline nevertheless in bold serif, the new logical framework of complementarity. So we need this page and a third as an introductory frame to come to this stack. And why do we have to bother with this stack at all? Well, you don't. You can leave. Where are you going to go? There is nowhere to go that you have not already been so many times that you're so familiar about it that you just assume that you can, with impunity, do what you want. And on that level, the ego feels free. With that kind of pumped up, ignorant arrogance, the ego always is at home. One little photon of humility bursts that bubble, pierces that horizon. And the universe is raining photons and many other radiations all the time. The trick, the knack, is to not have it stick to you so you don't become irradiated. That's the way of death. Doesn't matter about metabolic timers. It matters. Because spiritual freedom is available. The new logical framework of complementarity. The text. This new logical framework, known as complementarity, will assume increasingly more importance in this discussion. Although it is a central feature of the Copenhagen interpretation, that means Niels Bohr, although it is a central feature of the Copenhagen interpretation, which is now held to be the orthodox or standard interpretation of quantum theory, we will make the case that it is not well understood by many physical scientists. It is not. Not even physicists. Why? No one is immune to the infection of the mythic horizon, even if you have developed the capacity for abstract thought. Because abstract thought itself is still factorable into the natural cycle of integration. One is not necessarily conscious just because you're capable of abstract thought. In fact, a certain sign of the Nazi Superman is to be able to have abstract thought and have no visionary consciousness whatsoever that's operative. Person to note that as a possibility for a future humanity was Mary Shelley. When her husband, Percy, was having a highfalutin wine brain bust with Lord Byron during a thunderstorm in Switzerland on Lake Geneva, and they were getting these wild fantasies about the possible nightmares facing future man, Mary came up with the worst possible nightmare, the Frankenstein. The Superman gone wrong is really nightmare scenario. Someone we can't do anything about. They're stronger than us. They're smarter than us. But they are crimped in a criminal way that they're against us always and against life. So that abstract thought is not at all the same as consciousness. Abstract thought is symbolic. Abstract thought is symbolic in the sense that ideas, more powerful than images, ideas which can structure the whole mythic horizon. One can have a concept, a symbolic concept, strong enough to deform an entire mythic horizon, make a manifold out of a Riemann surface, but not necessarily a differentiable manifold, so that there is no visionary possibility whatsoever, yet there is this tremendous power, this symbolic, ideational power. And when you have that, instead of having vision, you have The term was coined by a German because the German language mind faced this all over again, and the last time it had been faced with such intensity was the Greek language mind, and so they used the Greek term which Plato used for this idea. And in its modern equivalent, it was called ideology. The study of ideas that have become frozen in an inoperative mode, and how are you going to deal with it? Because nothing crushes people faster and on a wider scale than an ideology, an ism. My favorite example is fascism, because it's a latent virus that's still there. And because it is possible for an abstract brain, as distinct from a visionary mind, from a conscious mind, it's possible to construct an abstract brain capable of enforcing an ideology on a mythic horizon, that there exists every possibility for real nightmare, for mechanical brain, like a robot, to be evolved, who would manipulate without our egos even knowing it, the entire mythic horizon of mankind, and keeping us under a perfect machine precision, abstract tyranny. That possibility is very real. And the 21st century, men and women are going to have to face that before that century is out. 100 years from now, that's going to be fighting turf for men and women. Because no one's going to get to the 22nd century without handling that issue. The tyranny of an abstract, precision, mechanical brain over a mankind unconsciously frozen into a seemingly free mythic horizon is a very real possibility. Much more real than nuclear war. In fact, it's a guaranteed, determined occurrence unless we do something about it. If we do nothing, it's an absolute certainty. History leads that way, direct line. So that this kind of education is all about survival, it's about life, it's about future, it's about reality, and it's indispensable. And its foe is not because there are not thousands of people paying moolah in to make my life comfortable. That's not the issue at all. That's no problem at all. That is not a real problem. The real problem is within the next 100 years of facing that kind of thing. Why? Because an abstract brain capable of scientific precision, mechanical precision, manipulating without our even knowing it, a mythic horizon within which we think we are free, is only consciousness which is able to differentiate from myth, from reality, as we would say. Nothing against myth. Nothing whatsoever. It not only was a comfortable home for dozens of millennia for our forebears, and is now tribally very good blanket, which we need on cold ritual nights. We still need it. There's nothing wrong with stories around the campfire. But there has to be the ability to wake up the next morning and to see by starlight what gives. We have to have that differentiable capacity. Because the fascism of about 2 generations from now, much more sophisticated than the Nazis. Those guys were stumble bums compared to these guys coming. these guys coming? No way. They're professionals. Professionals. You don't even, a professional is someone who wins the fight without having to fight. You didn't even know that there was a fight and that you lost. That's a professional. Yeah. A professional gunfighter can draw. You didn't even see them draw. They're not just fast. It's not even noticeable. You don't even know that how you were shot. All this has to do with a stack that begins with black holes and time warps and ends with the analysis of space-time singularities. Because only human beings who are capable of coming to their own singularity and then differentially developing vision to be able to come to their real person can lens a cosmos that is free, truly unbounded. In a way, to put it in the old religious terminology, if man can't get to heaven, he will certainly perish in hell. There's no way that if you don't make it to freedom, that you can, at some halfway partial point, be free. It's a play on the old paradox of Zeno. If you only go part way to a destination, you will never reach there in a universe that permits existentiality. Any universe that permits thingness to occur, and this universe does, permits any smaller and smaller particle to exist, and the segment remaining will always be there, even though it diminishes towards infinity, will always be there. Only when we transcend the conditional limits of existence and emerge into continuous reality, where thusness occurs, where we achieve the destination in one move, a movement of no speed whatsoever, only then is heaven available. Complementarity, black holes and time warps. We open up here, chapter 11, entitled, What is Reality? No kidding. What is reality? This is what your textbooks are for. If you'd like to take the course next time, get your textbooks and read along with it. It opens up. What is reality? And in smaller print under it, the machines conk out exactly at the moment that we need to go on, and we will go on, regardless of the machines. The smaller print. What is reality in which space-time is viewed as curved on Sundays and flat on Mondays? And horizons are made from vacuum on Sundays and charge on Mondays. But Sunday's experiments and Monday's experiments agree in all details. So next week we'll come back. Because there's something about the enlightened person, like a black hole, where existence and reality, though they are differentiable almost to a point of exclusion, nevertheless can occur as a pair. The mystery of life is that they do occur as a pair. And that when is and is not occur as a pair, there is unbounded possibility, which is called freedom. And that unbounded possibility sabotages forever, permanently, the ability of any super genius robot of enslaving us in an ultimate tyranny without our knowing. because they can run the tap water of ideology forever, and the tub will never fill because the plug is pulled. That's as simple as I can say it. And once there is a population of men and women who have pulled the plug on the tub of ignorance, you can still get clean anytime that you want to and use the tub, but you will never drown in it. You can still use ideas to do whatever you need to do, and they will function as ideas, but they will never stop up and back up as an ideology and murder you, or our children, or our forebears, or our ancestors, or anyone.